honestly, I was a little scared when I first sort of arrived and got there, and everyone kind of seemed to know what they were doing, and I was like, oh gosh, I really don't know anything about this, and so I'm just kind of getting thrown into it.
Faster Purple Worm Kill Kill is one of the most fun D&D shows there are, and this episode is no exception. You guys were hilarious in this episode, and I love Tomas.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciated doing it. It was a hard fought battle, and obviously we were all vanquished, but it was fun.
That's how it tends to go with this show. My first question for you, how experienced are you with Dungeons and Dragons? And then how did you get involved in the show?
It had been a really long time. I first played Dungeons and Dragons when I was probably, oh my gosh, maybe 6 or 7 years old. When my brother James and started to get into it, and my older brothers started to play, and I had no idea what was going on, and I played with them a little bit, just for a year or two, and then they kind of got older, and I sort of lost interest and didn't play for a while, and then when I was in high school, towards the very end of my high school year, so it's like my senior year when most of our friends were off. We're like going to parties and things like that. A group of friends and I kind of got bored with our social scene and started playing D&D a little bit. And so I got back into it. But again, that's high school, and that was a long time ago. And I have not played ever since then. So there's so many things that I didn't remember. I got back into the reason I appeared on the show is because Matthew Lillard's a good friend, and he asked me to do it, and he's one of those friends you make in Hollywood over the years. You've been there a long time, that like you trust him, he's a good guy, and he's somebody who when he calls me, I answer the phone, and if he says, hey buddy, I got this fun thing to do, I say, sure, I'm in.
And then what were your initial thoughts when you heard that, like, this is a show where all of the characters will die by the end of the episode?
Because I'm naturally a little bit competitive, my initial instinct is, wait, do we have to die? God, isn't there some way that I can figure it out? Is there some way I can crack this code and miraculously figure out a way to outsmart the game and stay alive? I was not able to do that, but that's okay. Honestly, I was a little scared when I first sort of arrived and got there, and everyone kind of seemed to know what they were doing, and I was like, oh gosh, I really don't know anything about this, and so I'm just kind of getting thrown into it.
I always find new players to be the most fun to watch, because while it starts with like trepidation, they're the ones who are going to come up with the most imaginative ideas, because they haven't they haven't put the box in their head of what they should do.
I think I was trying to take it a little more seriously in some ways, partially just out of vanity, because I didn't want to come off looking like an idiot.
It worked well with the dynamic of everyone else just being completely silly.
Yeah, good. I appreciate that.
Can you talk to me about creating your character, Tomas, and kind of how maybe knowing he had an end point affected your build?
Well, first of all, I have to give a shout out to my cats, Tommy and the Business, and because that's who Tomas Bizbear was named for, my two cats. But and so then, of course, the theme of cats came up on the show, which was great. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of wanted to create the character in a way that felt right. That's why I chose things that seemed comfortable, and I knew he was going to die because I didn't want to get too attached. An interesting thing was when you roll up the character, you do it electronically. Which was like, oh, I remember when we were kids, we used to cheat and you can't cheat anymore. Like, oh, this is a bad. I accidentally rolled this one. Let me roll again. When you're drawing up the character, and I wasn't able to do that, so I had one tool taken out of my toolbox.
Oh my gosh, I love that you named your character after your cats. That's my favorite thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, one of them's right here. Maybe I can get him to make a cameo.
Oh, I love that. And then one of the things that I always find very, very cool about people that are used to acting on stage or on camera that come into this world is you're used to working with like a director, a script, usually multiple takes, especially if you're doing film or TV. How fun was it to jump into a world with just fully improvisational collaborative storytelling where you had to work with everyone else there to keep the story moving?
It was fun, but also a little bit daunting. The most experience I've had lately, I have a background in theater, but I haven't done a play in some time. And I feel like the most experience I have with any kind of improvisation is doing, interviews like this or that kind of like live, these like live shows occasionally, being on awards ceremonies or something like that. But so I hadn't like my skills needed a little sharpening. And it was nice to watch, before we recorded our episode, I was able to watch the previous episode and watched my friend Seth Green performing and got to see like, oh, this is somebody who's really got this down. And Matt Lillard himself too, like watching those guys like, oh, these guys are on top of all this, and tried to like, and then you want to get in there and also like perform for the crowd and stuff like that. So yeah, it was interesting. Because
this is such a like condensed show, with it being only like 40 something minutes, how do you kind of collaborate with the other players to make sure everyone has a moment to shine while still also like making sure the story continues forward? For the most part, I think that's just kind of those are like performance skills that you acquire over the years of doing it for a long time. Like, when you're part of an ensemble that's how that works. It's not nobody just picks the ball up and runs with it. You have to pass the ball back and forth, so to speak. So I think that's just I tend to veer less towards, hey, beforehand, let's work something out that we're going to do, or some bit we're going to do, or say those end up generally tending to fall pretty flat. So I think it's better to just make sure that you really listen to the other people. You find your spots when they appear, and it's a give and take. Awesome. And then can you talk to me about collaborating with the other players, especially Deborah Ann Wall, who just was going full comedy with this one? She's a bit of a kook, and I say that with affection. It was definitely fun, and it did throw me a little bit off from the beginning, which you probably tell when you watch the episode, because I was like, oh, this is full character comedy. Like, I thought I was still kind of being myself. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to change what I'm doing, but now I need sort of like, we need to like merge here, meet somewhere in the middle. But yeah, no, she was really funny. And again, it's that kind of thing. Like when we have one person going super character-y, then that also sort of solidified me being less so, because you want balance amongst the cast. Yes, the balance worked very well. And I have to ask, what inspired kind of your big damn hero moment where you got to jump in and really save the day with that one? Well, I was thinking of that right when I got it. When I got the weapon, I thought of that when I chose the weapon. I'm like, wait a minute, that means you could jump at something, and if you hold on to it when it's running towards you, or something like that. Obviously, the mouth thing seemed obvious. So when the monster came in, I was like, I got to find a way to jump in that thing's mouth, because I know I'm going to die anyway. Which is why I almost didn't want to. I think that
Jason, the DM, I think he started to like prod me in that direction, and I wanted to be like, no, I already thought of this. You don't have to do it. I want to show you that I've come up with this on my own. But yeah, it seemed like an obvious way to kill something that was borderline unkillable.
I loved it. I loved that the skeleton was still hanging from the rod.
Yeah.
It's such a fun detail.
Yeah, probably just for like a few like heroic seconds before the fingers break and it falls to the ground.
And I'm going to shift gears for just a second. You've played a lot of heroic characters, and you're going to with the DC universe as well. What are you excited to explore with like the sheer like number of characters you're going to be playing in the DC universe with Weasel, GI Robot, Maxwell Lord, and how do you approach these performances differently? It's
true that they're all in the DC universe, so there's that sort of extra element. But as an actor, like I'm well equipped to play a variety of different types of characters, and even me as a very character actor, I've done so many different weird types of things. So it's like, in addition to those three characters that you mentioned, I'm also doing. I have like, three different independent movies that I'm doing, starting next week and doing over the course of the next few months. So there's a whole bunch of characters that I'm trying to navigate all of them. But for DC in particular, one of the things that makes it easy is that the Creature Commandos characters are so right now they're animated for Creature Commandos, but even if they were live action, like we've seen with Weasel, there's still CG. They'd be CG characters. GI Robot is also obviously a robot. So it's like they're more sort of, Weasel, yes, he grunts and things, but it's mostly about the movement. GI is almost completely about the voice. So they're a little bit different from one another. And they're in the kind of far-flung reaches of the character spectrum of the universe. The other one you mentioned, who I'm not sure I can still technically mention publicly, even though obviously the word is out that there's there. All I can say is that character is a little bit more grounded in being in a lot more grounded, obviously, as a human being. And so that's something that's a character that I'll tackle in a more traditional way.
I'm so excited for Creature Commandos. I am curious though, because you mentioned like Weasel mostly grunts. Does that make the voice acting harder?
Yeah. Who knows? I don't even know how to answer sometimes when it's harder or easier. I don't know. It makes it different. I would say that. Yeah. Weasel isn't having emotional scenes that require a lot of analysis. But he does do a whole lot of wheezing and panting that requires a lot of water. So whichever one sounds harder to you, it's, it is, I guess I'm not sure whether it's harder. It's not quite as fun, but it's still, playing Weasel is a blast.
Oh, I love that. And then shifting back over to the Fast Purple Worm, can you talk to me about the live interactive audience element and how that impacted you as a performer? Because you said you haven't done
it was great. It was great. It was absolutely, it's old school, and like it's I don't, it was really smart of them to do that, because a lot of shows, particularly shows with like, that are a little more sort of bare bones in their production, and obviously they don't have like some massive production budget to deal with. So it was really, really smart decision, I think, on the part of the show to bring in a live audience to watch, because the performances just don't work without it. You don't even know where it's hard to understand the texture of the performance without getting input from some kind of source, whether it's laughter or oohing and eyeing or applause or whatever it is. So yeah, that part of it was really cool. And I think, I'm not sure I would have been able to, it would have been really hard without them there.
And then what did you find most surprising about this experience? And is there anything you want to take from it into future projects?
Oh, it was super fun. I think that I sort of have touched on some of the things that were most surprising, which are, it was a reminder for me of how long it's been since I'd performed in front of a live audience, and a reminder that those skills are a little bit different than the skills that I'm, trying to use when I'm performing on camera, and mostly just how fun it is. That like, oh yeah, I want to get back out there, and I don't know, maybe the show will have me back. We'll see.
Well, that's perfect leading into my last question, because I'm hoping there's a second season. If you were able to put together like your dream table to play with for a second season, who would it be?
I think what would be really, really fun, honestly, and don't take this as any sort of a teaser, because I don't think his schedule would ever allow it, but I would love to play with my brother.
Yeah.
I mean, he would be the master at something like that, because he's so good at his storytelling muscle is very well is pretty buff, and he's also funny, and we can play off each other really well. So if I could play with him and any of the group of friends, the longer you've known somebody, the easier it is in some ways, and so some of those guys like Matt Lillard and Seth Green, people we've known for a long time, like that would be an amazing group of people to play with.
That sounds like a dream table, and I hope it happens. But as you said, everyone's very busy. So
yeah, I know.